Something happened on live television that you're not supposed to notice, but once you see it, you cannot unsee it. A host, a routine segment, an Ilhan Omar appearance that was supposed to go exactly how corporate media likes it to go: safe, predictable, contained, and then everything shifted. The tone changed, the energy dropped. The host hesitated, and suddenly the show was over. Like, no warning, no wrap up, no explanation, just an abrupt cut that screamed panic. Because this wasn't about running out of time. It wasn't about breaking news, and it definitely was not about protecting viewers. It was about control. Well, tonight, we're breaking down the moment that forced a live shutdown and why it exposed something far bigger than one Ilhan Omar clip. This was the moment that the media's carefully managed extremism narrative cracked in public. The moment MSNBC's credibility problem collided with mass migration fallout, collapsing trust, and a country that's no longer buying this script. So under President Trump's second term, the rules have clearly changed and legacy media hasn't quite caught up yet. So when the talking points fail, when the audience sees through it, when the host finally realizes that the conversation can't be steered anymore, they don't argue. They just go ahead and pull the plug, go ahead and yank the cord right out the wall. And that silence right there, that is the real story, guys. So stick with me, because what happened next explains why corporate media is unraveling in real time. Make sure you're subscribed. If you don't do anything else, hit the subscribe button, join the family. I really appreciate you guys. We are growing like crazy. This is where everything shifts, okay? The segment starts like every other safe, scripted cable news conversation. Familiar framing, predictable cadence, the kind of exchange where everyone knows their role. But then Ilhan Omar responds and something feels a little off. Not what she says at first, but how she says it. The pause, the slight smile, the nonverbal cues that don't quite match the gravity of what's being discussed. I mean, you can see it register in real time. The host hesitates. There's a micro freeze there. The rhythm breaks, because in that moment, guys, the conversation isn't dangerous to public safety. It's dangerous to the narrative. The framing slips. The emotional tone doesn't quite align with the approved storyline. And then suddenly, the host realizes that this isn't going where it's supposed to go. That's the moment corporate media fears the most. Not disagreement, not outrage. They actually like that stuff. I'm talking about unpredictability, live, unfiltered, and impossible to spin once the audience notices. Now, let's be very clear about this, okay? Shows don't end abruptly by accident. That ain't how it works, okay? Live television is designed with buffers, wrap signals, producer cues, and fallback topics, okay? When a segment ends suddenly, it's because someone upstairs made a decision. Fast. Now, this wasn't about time. It wasn't breaking news. It wasn't a technical issue. It was containment. Corporate media isn't built to explore uncomfortable territory in real time. It is built to manage exposure. Once a conversation threatens to drift outside of approved framing, especially on extremism, ideology, or even protected political figures, the safest move is silence. Cut the feed, kill the program, change the subject, end the show. That's not journalism. That is risk management. And the faster the cut, the clearer the panic, because it tells you the control room knew that they had already lost the moment. Now, this is where the real danger emerged, not in outrage, but in exposure. For years, guys, extremism has been narrowly defined on cable news. It points in one direction. It's framed politically, selectively, and safely. But during that Ilhan Omar exchange, the framing starts to wobble. The language doesn't land cleanly. The emotional cues don't match the moral lecture. And all of a sudden, suddenly, viewers are left asking questions that the media doesn't want asked. What is extremism? Who decides? Why is it always applied asymmetrically? Ilhan Omar's comments, intentionally or not, threaten to blur that line. And once the audience senses inconsistency, the spell breaks. Extremism stops being a moral label and starts looking more like a political tool. That's the crack. Because once people realize that definitions are flexible depending upon who's speaking, trust collapses real fast. Corporate media can survive disagreement. What it can't survive is the audience realizing that the rules change mid-sentence. And that hesitation that we're talking about, that pause before action, that's not just a media problem. This is a real life problem for a lot of people that are watching this show today. Okay. Now, I talked to a guy recently who said to me, he said, I meant to call, but life got busy. Then January hit and he was locked into a bad Medicare plan for an entire year. A full year of overpaying, a full year of stress that he didn't even need to deal with. His wife was mad at him. It was all bad. And this is exactly how fast situations show up when decisions get delayed. Chapter exists to stop that from happening to you. They walk you through your Medicare options before the deadline passes so that a simple pause doesn't turn into a 12-month cycle of regret. Now, most people are already dialing the phone number at the bottom of your screen right there, 909-563-8279, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. There's a link down below. Click the link to get the clarity while you still can, because just like we saw on live TV, waiting too long costs a whole lot more money. Now, this didn't start with Ilhan Omar, and I promise you it will not end with her, okay? You see, legacy media has been quietly rebranding language for years. Extremism, hate, misinformation, none of these words are static anymore. They're elastic, expanded or narrowed depending upon who needs protection and who needs policing. Now, in 2025, with Trump back in office and trust already in freefall, outlets like MSNBC, they are fighting for survival. Let's not forget about CNN either. Ratings alone aren't the only problem. Credibility is. So definitions become strategy. Language becomes armor. If you can redefine the threat, you never have to confront it. This is why moments like this trigger panic, because live TV doesn't allow for revision. You can't rewrite a definition fast enough when your audience is watching the framing fall apart in real time, can you? Right? And so when that happens, silence becomes the last defense. Now, in December 2025, the problem for MSNBC isn't just the ratings, it's belief. Nobody believes them anymore. I mean, does anybody believe MSNBC anymore, or are they untrustworthy? Well, under President Trump's second term, legacy media no longer gets to play the role of moral opposition. You know what I'm saying? The illusion's gone. So what's left is a trust gap that keeps on widening. Viewers didn't slowly drift away. They disconnected. And once the trust breaks, let's just say it typically doesn't come back with better graphics or louder panels. So audiences, they now cross-check everything. They notice framing tricks. They recognize when stories are rushed or softened or quietly dropped. And MSNBC, they already know it. This is why moments like the Ilhan Omar segment were so dangerous. They happen live, outside the safety of post-production spin. Now, this is not about being conservative or being liberal anymore. It's about credibility. And so when every abrupt cutoff reminds viewers that the network is managing perception, not actually reporting reality, nobody wants to deal with them anymore. That's the crisis that they don't lead with. Because once people stop believing you, well, the mic doesn't matter. And Ilhan Omar, she used to be safe television, predictable framing, built on outrage, a reliable villain or victim depending upon the segment. But in 2025, she's become something else entirely, a risk. Not because she challenges power, but because she exposes contradictions media would rather keep buried. Her rhetoric, her tone, and her associations increasingly create moments that just cannot be tightly framed. And when that happens live, producers panic, because Omar doesn't just provoke critics, she forces uncomfortable questions from people who are supposed to be on her side. And this is why these moments don't get explored. They get shut down. Friendly media, they can't handle controversy when it's scripted. What they can't handle is unpredictability. I tell you that much. This right there, that threatens their narrative architecture. And that is exactly what happened here. And so here's the pressure point corporate media keeps dodging, because once you say it out loud, there's no unringing the bell. Mass migration in Western cities is not an abstract moral debate anymore. This is a logistical and financial reality. Housing shortages, overloaded shelters, city budgets stretched past the breaking points. Look, social services are being rationed, for Christ's sake, guys, and working class communities competing for fewer resources while being told not to notice. This is not about ideology. It's basic math. It's just arithmetic. But cable news, they avoid the topic because it just doesn't fit cleanly into the approved extremism framework. That is it. So you can't dismiss people as radical when they're talking about rent, school overcrowding, or emergency services that don't show up. Anybody ever have to dial 911 and they either don't answer or don't even show up? This is why moments like the Ilhan Omar segment matter, because when ideology collides with real world consequences, the narrative stops working, and media silence only confirms what viewers already feel. So by late 2025, the consequences are visible everywhere. I mean, just look on Zillow, look on Realtor.com, look at Redfin. Housing costs remain elevated, inflation still bites, and migration stress compounds problems that politicians and media promised would not happen. Welfare systems strain, local governments quietly reallocate funds, and everyday Americans feel the squeeze. Meanwhile, they're being told that the problem doesn't exist. That, my friends, is a disconnect. People aren't rejecting compassion; they're rejecting the denial. They're done being lectured by the networks that never address the trade-offs. And when corporate media refuses to acknowledge these realities, trust doesn't just erode; it just completely evaporates. This is why the audience response has changed. The moment that they sense evasion, they tune out. No amount of moral framing can override lived experience. Am I right? And every abrupt broadcast halt tells viewers the same thing. They're not wrong for noticing that. Now, this moment doesn't happen in a vacuum, and that matters. Donald Trump is clearly the president again, and that single fact alone completely alters the media landscape in 2025. Now, for years, legacy networks, look, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, they all survived by casting themselves as the resistance. Every misstep could be framed as moral opposition. Every failure could be blamed on somebody else. That doesn't work anymore. And so now the media is no longer outside power, it's exposed alongside of it. And so when the narratives fall apart, there's no fallback position. There's no rally cry. There's no emergency framing to reset the audience. There's none of that. This is why panic sets in faster now. A live segment spinning out of control isn't just embarrassing, it's destabilizing, because the old playbook doesn't apply in a second Trump term where voters are already rejecting media framing. So narrative authority is gone, that's shot, and once that's gone, control becomes fragile. Now, here's the tell that most people miss, okay? When institutions are confident, they argue, they debate, they rebut. But when they're not, they go quiet. Abrupt sign-offs, sudden topic changes, awkward silences, those are not production errors, they're admissions. They signal that the ground has shifted and the people in charge already know it. History shows this pattern every time institutional power starts slipping. The silence actually comes before the reckoning, and the viewers instinctively recognize it. They don't need an explanation, they can feel it. This is why the cut feed mattered more than anything that was said on air. It confirmed what audiences already suspected, that some conversations cannot be had live anymore because the answers just don't serve the narrative. And silence is safer than honesty for them. Now, here is the huge mistake corporate media keeps making. They think people are misinformed. They think their viewers are stupid, but they're not. Viewers didn't miss the point. They caught the point. They saw the hesitation. They noticed the tonal shift. They understood why the show ended early without anyone having to explain it. And once that happens enough times, something breaks. Trust didn't collapse because of bad actors online. It collapsed because audiences repeatedly watched networks dodge obvious questions about ideology, migration, accountability, and consequences while insisting everything was fine. Now, that creates disconnect, not confusion. People stop engaging, they stop debating, they leave. They just quietly leave. They don't even say they leave. They just bounce. And when they do, the power of the platform disappears with them. That's why silence on air is so damaging right now. It confirms the audience's suspicion that honesty isn't allowed past a certain point. And so once viewers disengage emotionally, you don't get them back. They ain't coming back. And let's go ahead and end where the truth actually is. This wasn't about Ilhan Omar. She wasn't the cause. She was the trigger. The real story is institutional panic, a media system that's realizing that it no longer controls the narrative, the language, or even the audience's trust. When definitions stop working, when moral framing fails, when lived reality overrides talking points, control slips. That is what the abrupt cutoff revealed. Not outrage, not censorship, but fear. Fear that the audience is ahead of the script. And in 2025, under a second Trump presidency, that fear is justified because once people stop believing managed narratives, silence becomes the last defense. And even that doesn't work anymore. If you made it this far, guys, you already know this wasn't a broadcast mistake. This was a reckoning. Like, subscribe, share. We'll see you next time. Hey, by the way, guys, if you're one of the real ones who really enjoy what we do here on the channel, you've got to check out the Inner Circle. This is where our true supporters get exclusive access to content that I just can't share here, completely commercial free. It's also the best way to keep this channel going strong. So if you want to be a part of something special, join us over there. Links in the description or in the pinned comment down below.